Okay, so when we say situation, basically what that is it's like relative location. Okay, it's what's around a specific point. Okay, so it's not exactly what's there. It's not like, oh, I'm going to put my business here at this very point. It's, I'm going to put my business here because this is near it, and this is near it, and this is near it. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Yes? Okay. All right, so when we look at situation factors and we look at relative location, so what's around or what's going to be around my business that would make me want to locate there? Okay, we look at a few things. The first thing that we look at is proximity to inputs, which is, again, a fancy way of saying your inputs are your raw materials. Okay, so what is it that's going to go into my business? What am I going to make? Okay, what do I need to be located next to in order for my factory to run? Okay. So, one type of business is what's called bulk reducing. Now remember, geographers are not creative namers. Okay, so bulk reducing is exactly how it sounds. It's something that goes in bulky, and when it comes out of the manufacturing process, it comes out small. Okay, so for bulk reducing, what we could say, we can do a big square, and when it comes out smaller. Okay, exactly how it sounds. Goes in really big and bulky, comes out all small. Okay, so let's think about why we would care about that. Okay, if you're transporting something big and bulky, what kind of cost are you looking at? Bless you. Yes, it's high cost. Okay, because remember, they charge you by how much something weighs. Okay, so if it's bulk reducing, it's big when it starts out. You want to be closer to it so that your transportation costs are not going to be as big, okay? Copper is a great example of that. I would know your examples. That's why I listed them on there, okay? Copper is a great example of that. Steel is another great example. They locate close to their raw materials because they're bulk reducing. And then that way, when they're finished making what they're making, it comes out smaller. They can be farther from the market. Okay. So that's proximity to inputs, bulk reducing. The next thing that they consider is proximity to market. So what's market? What do you do there?
Where they can sell their items.
Yes, okay, so this is where your consumers are. Okay, so with with proximity to inputs, we worry about bulk reducing. We got to be close to our raw resource. With proximity to markets, it's actually the opposite, okay? So it's bulk gaining. Okay, so it goes in little, but when it comes out of the manufacturing process, it's bigger. Okay, so these are going to be things like cars, okay? Any sort of like automotive vehicle, that's going to be bulk gaining. It goes in as a bunch of teeny tiny little parts. Well, some teeny tiny. Okay, and then it comes out as a big car. Okay, do cars weigh a lot? Yes, so they're going to cost a lot to ship. So they are going to be closer to the market when they finish. Okay, another good example, beverage production. Think like Coca-Cola. Okay, it goes in as a little skinny plastic tube. Okay, and then it comes out a bottle of Coca-Cola. Okay, so that's going to weigh way more than a little plastic tube. Okay, so it's got to be close to its consumer, okay, because it goes in little and then it comes out big. So that's one type of industry that has to be close to the market. Another type of industry is your single market manufacturers, and this kind of goes with the automotive industry, this whole idea of bulk gaining. They call it JIT production. Okay, it stands for just in time. Now remember, again, geographers are not creative namers. Okay, it's industry where their materials arrive just in time. Okay, so these type of manufacturers, they get deliveries like every couple of hours because they don't store any of the stuff that they need to make what they're making. Okay, so think again like automotive assembly plants. They bring in all the parts, they get delivered every couple of hours. Bless you. And then they get put on the assembly line right when they need them. So if they're not housing any of those products, those pieces that they need for assembly, what does that do for their manufacturing facility?
Smaller.
It can be smaller or
dependent on shipping.
no. Think about assembly plant. If you're not worried about wasting space on storing stuff,
You can put more assembly lines.
you can have more assembly lines. You can make more things, okay? And that's what they do, okay? So they don't have to worry about storing anything because everything arrives just in time. Okay, now another thing, and this is kind of thinking back to Von Thunen a little bit. Okay, another thing that has to be close to market are your perishable items. Okay, so like bread, milk. All right, now I know that now we have refrigeration and we don't worry too much about that. But again, remember, milk does go, eventually it does go bad. Okay, it's not like we have magical refrigerators that keeps it good forever for when you're ready. Okay, so you still do have to be somewhat close to the market. So perishable industries, those have to be close. Another thing that can go bad, and I say that with quotations here, is newspapers. They're dated. Okay, so and I know we don't really use newspapers too much anymore, but people still do. And once you print the news, is it old? Yes, something's already happened by the time you've printed it. Okay, so it has to be close to the consumer so that by the time they get to it, it's not old news, right? Even though it really is old news, kind of. Okay, so now what this all boils down to, what you need to know about all of this is that it's all about transportation costs. Okay, where do I need to be so that I'm not spending all my money on shipping things out? So then you got to look at, well, how am I going to ship it? Okay, so we look at different modes of transportation. Now, here's the thing, and this it sounds kind of backwards sometimes, but the longer the distance of transportation is, the cheaper it's going to be. Okay, because you don't have to, as it's traveling, you don't have to pay workers to load and unload because it just stays loaded, okay? The farther distance you travel, the cheaper per mile it gets, okay? So, and think like, you're thinking of like ships and things like that would go farther. Okay, so now, and here's something that I definitely want you to note, okay? Your stuff, never by plane. Okay, you will not get your stuff by plane unless you're like a millionaire. Okay, so a lot of times, and that was something that was hard last year for students to understand. You would say, well, how does your food get to you? And they would always say, by plane. No, never by plane. Okay, it's always going to be on the ground, or if it can stay good for a long time, it'll come by ship. But it's never going to be by plane. It's too expensive. How many have ever had to overnight something? Okay, when you overnight something, what happens to the shipping costs?
Way up.
It goes way up. Sometimes it's more than whatever it is you're buying, right? Okay, so and that's because it's might travel by plane. And think about it. If you travel by plane, can you just take as many suitcases as you want? No, right? They always weigh them, and then they get like real picky about how much they weigh and how much you're taking onto the plane and all that. That's because a plane has to be under a certain weight if you want it to fly in the air. Okay, so that's why plane is always the most expensive. Okay, so most of your stuff does not come by plane. Okay, now why would it come by truck? Trucks are like one-day deliveries, like Dallas to Houston. That would go by truck. Okay, why would it go by train? Train might be like from Dallas to, say, Tennessee. That might go by train. Okay, so it's going to take a little longer. Maybe it might take a week. Okay, if it's going to go by ship, that's going to be very low cost because it takes a very long time. All right, but what can you do with ships?
Longer distance.
They can go longer distance, but what else?
Massive.
Yeah, they can take a mass amount of weight. Okay, huge amounts of weights. Okay, so since you can load pretty much as you want onto a ship, that's why it's so cheap. Okay, you have to think about cost of fuel, cost of workers that are working on this particular mode of transportation, things like that. Okay, so as you get longer distances, the less rest that mode of transportation needs. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah, okay. All right, so that's situation. That's all relative location. What's around me that's going to make me want to locate here? Okay, let's look at site factors. Okay, site factors. So if situation is relative location, site is absolute. Okay, so that's like the dot on the map. X marks the spot. It's exactly right here that I'm going to locate. Okay, and so with site factors, you consider three things. Okay, you consider labor, land, and capital. All right, so for labor, you ask the question, how many workers? Okay, is my labor force, am I going to have a lot of workers, or do I not need that many workers? Okay, so these are things you have to think about. Now, if it's labor intensive, so here's the problem with labor intensive. It's not necessarily saying that the work is like hard, like it's exhausting, it's physically tiring. What it's saying is you're going to need a lot of workers, so it's labor intensive. Think about when they manufacture clothes. Is it one person sitting at a sewing machine making one t-shirt? No, it's one person sitting at a sewing machine making the right arm. Okay, the person next to them only making the left arms. Okay, the person next to them maybe making like the collar. Okay, and then finally somebody would sew them all together. Okay, but it's bits and pieces of that article of clothing. That's labor intensive. So if it's labor intensive, are you going to want your factory in an MDC like us?
No.
Why not?
Yeah,
we cost way more, right? We have minimum wage, things like that. So factories are going to want to locate then in what type of country? Yeah, LDCs or maybe even, yeah. Okay, so they're going to locate in LDCs or NICs because they're going to want to save money wherever they can. And if you have a lot of workers, a good place to save money would be an LDC or a NIC. Okay, so this is why a lot of American factories are located just across the border in Mexico. Okay, because Mexico has these maquiladoras. Okay, those are factories. All right, so they're just over the border. So it entices workers to come up to the border to work there because they pay a little more, but for us, it's less if we locate it just across the border. Okay, so that would be one situation. What's another situation that we use? What country? Say it loud and proud. China. Okay, always China. All right, okay, so that's one thing you consider. Another thing you consider is land. How much do I need? Okay, well, our factory is big or small?
Big.
Yeah, they're pretty big, right? And they're never going to be two-story because machines are too heavy. So you would have to reinforce the floor and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so you're going to need a place where your building can spread out. Okay, it needs to sprawl. It needs to have plenty of space for all those big machines. So remember Von Tunen, the closer you are to the city, what happens to your land? Yeah, it gets more, well, yes, less land, but it gets more expensive. Okay, so you have to be out in rural areas because that is where your cheap land is. Okay, this is why people started coming to Frisco. Okay, so even still today, I guess still by a lot, but even still today, Frisco land is cheaper than Dallas land. Okay, I mean, Dallas, it doesn't have the space that it used to, obviously. But this is why, like, Toyota came out here. This is why, like, the Cowboys facility is out here. Okay, so think of all the new businesses that are coming out here. It's because land is cheap here. Okay, even to buy a house is cheaper out here. Okay, and as Frisco grows more and more, they're going to go further and further out. So before you know it, maybe Prosper or even Salina is going to be where factories go, because that land's going to be even cheaper. Okay, so you look for cheap land when you have a factory, because you don't want to pay too much for this big chunk of land that you need. Okay, something else you want to consider is environmental factors. Not necessarily like, what am I going to do to the environment? No, not like that. More of like, well, okay, I'm going to use a lot of electricity. So maybe if I can locate close to water, I could have access to a dam, and then that would be cheaper electricity. Okay, so you look at what the environment can give you, either for free or cheap. Okay, so that's what I mean by environmental factors. Okay, then the last thing, capital. Money. Okay, so now if you're going to build a business, do you pay for it all? No, you want investors. Okay, now do investors like to see what's going on with their money that you're using? Yes. Okay, so a lot of times people might locate a particular business close to where their investors are. Okay, so think a long time ago when the automotive industry is booming out in the Midwest. Now the Rust Belt, not so much anymore. But when they were, the people that were investing in them were bankers from the Midwest. That's part of the reason why they located there. Okay, so you might end up being located close to your investors so that you can show your investors, see, look at all the good stuff I'm doing with your money. Okay, so that's what I mean by capital. All right, where is your money going to come from, and should you be close to that money? Okay, so in the end, what does this all boil down to? Location, location, location. That's what it's all about. Location really does matter. You can't just put a business just anywhere. You want to put it where it's going to be the most beneficial for you and where it's going to save you the most money. Okay, so this is what I want you to do. Use those notes. Okay, I want you to look at this page. Okay, and with your group, I want you to tell me 2 things for each of those products. Tell me what type of industry that would be. Okay, and then tell me how it would get to you. So you specifically. Okay, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so, all right, so let's go over this real quick. Okay, so for the Dr. Pepper bottling plant, that's always a hard one to say, what type of industry is that?
Bulk gain.
Yeah, it's bulk gaining. And then, so once it's done and it gets shipped out to you, yes, by truck. Okay, what about Mrs. Baird's bread?
Bulk gain. Perishable.
Perishable, yes.
Oh, we should do that too.
Okay, and then how would that get to you? Truck. You see sometimes the Mrs. Baird's trucks. What about steel? Bulk reducing.
Truck or trains?
Whoa, which one? Truck or train?
Both. It depends. Because trains can carry more.
It's train, yes. Because train, remember, you can load more on a train than a truck. Okay, so definitely by train.
Even if you need it really small distances.
That's a pretty far distance to ship steel, though. Okay, what about an I Love Wakeland t-shirt?
Labor intensive.
Labor intensive, yes. Yes, by boat.
We have to ship it from the port to the place.
Yes. What about the motorcycles?
Bulk gain.
Well, yes, but it is fabricated, but what kind? Yes. Bulk gaining. And so how would that get to you? Well, probably it might go train first, but then it's going to go truck. Yeah. And sometimes you see the big, 18-wheelers carrying the...
Bunch of cars.
Yeah. Okay, good.